Mech pilots, online. BattleTech manuals, online. Long-term memory, offline. All systems bungled. Initiating BungleTech podcast.
In our 23rd deployment of BungleTech, my spheroid co-host Michael and I discuss our global campaign initiative we're brainstorming that we want you to participate in. We welcome some new members into Clan Kodama in our extraordinary Proclamation segment. We discuss a huge rule mistake that we were making with PSRs in our Rule Check Discovery segment. And we read Bad Mechs Champion, written by the syrupy Sean at SARNA. Listen keenly to today's episode, MechWarriors, because we want you in our global campaign.
Bonus objective. Extraordinary Proclamation. Initiating.
Fellow members of Clan Kodama, another month has passed, and with it, another successful campaign. This month, our newly trained MechWarrior HeyZeus and MechWarrior Fiddler engaged 2 Explorer Corps lances of fire tender mechs, and with a cool precision, routed their opponents quickly and utterly. With their great victory, that was most definitely influenced by the unusual and complete replacement of heat sinks with additional weaponry made by recently cast technician DarkTremere. Not only did we salvage numerous of these fire tenders for our own use, but as well did we capture their brave captain, who fought tooth and nail to the end. Our new Bondsperson, G. You fought well, G, despite your Desgra physical attacks. But your mech was no match against our superior clan technology. To MechWarrior HeyZeus, MechWarrior Fiddler, Technician DarkTremere, and Bondsperson G. Welcome to Clan Kodama! Clan strong together!
This is Professor Michael presenting The Sphere We Live In. As with many former Comstar organizations, the Explorer Corps was long shrouded in mystery. The in-depth standard camouflage roles assumed by most exploration teams ensured that those who did meet members of the Corps likely never realized it, believing them to be traitors, colonists, or even privateers. It is mostly thanks to their limited collaboration with operatives from House Kurita that we know anything about their original mission and operations. Founded in 2959 and formerly known as the Comstar Explorer Service, its mission was twofold. First, map the vast multitude of star systems beyond the periphery, and second, perhaps more importantly, search for the remnants of General Kerensky's Exodus fleet. Now you know about the sphere we live in.
Primary objective. Podcast topic segment. Initiating.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to episode 23 of BungleTech, a BattleTech podcast. Today is another exciting, adventurous, expansive day, my Mech Warrior friends, because Michael and I are here to propose an interesting concept to you that we want to hear what you think about. And of course, as always, because I need him here, because without him here, it would just be a mindless, empty, meaningless ramble of Nathan, I'm joined again by the spiritedly sensual Michael. Hello, Michael.
I'm spirited. Hello, Nathan.
Hello. So everybody, I'm getting over sickness today. So if I sound a little bit stuffed up or a little bit icky, just focus on Michael's voice instead, and that will make it all better. The smooth voice of Michael.
I think you sound a little bit more like me now. You're a little bit more baritone.
Oh.
You've got more gravitas today.
Whoa. Ooh. Are you insinuating that my voice is sounding a little bit sensual?
No, absolutely not. I would never imply such a thing. First off, how dare you?
I'm sorry. I have overstepped.
We agreed I had a monopoly on sensuality for this podcast, and you're trying to steal my shtick.
Yeah, there can only be room for one. Okay. All right. To the topic of the episode, everybody. Okay. We have a vision, as Martin Luther King Jr. would say, a dream.
Is that really where we're going here?
I've been listening to the I Have a Dream speech recently. It's just, oh God, it's such a powerful speech. I won't go over it here. I hope everyone's listened to the Martin Luther King Jr. I Have a Dream speech. It is just an amazing, wonderful speech. Anywho, I have a dream. It's not as significant as his dream was, okay? His dream was pretty important. My dream's regarding BattleTech. BattleTech is important. Probably not as important as Martin Luther King was going for, you know what I mean? But anyhow, let's get into it. Michael and I and a few others have been brainstorming the concept of facilitating a global campaign initiative of some sort. And we're going to talk to you about that today. Because basically, what we want to do at a very high level is facilitate a campaign that you can leverage at your table, that we release on a monthly basis for you to put your mechs on the table, play the mission, and for that mission outcome itself to actually impact the path and the overall narrative experience of the campaign. So, imagine, if you will, you are a lance in a mercenary company. Note, this isn't the actual story confirmed so far, but just use this as your imagination. Imagine you are a lance in a mercenary company battling on a planet somewhere, and your table's one lance, Michael's table's another lance, Joe in New Zealand's table's another lance, Sean in Australia's table's another lance, Jana's table in the United States is another lance.
Rule of sevens, you gotta keep going.
There's people everywhere. Their
Okay.
tables are each a lance. And each lance is basically participating in this global sort of war effort that is happening. So we want to create and facilitate this thing where you can basically take the scenario, you can apply it at your table, you commit essentially to the length of the campaign. You don't have to play everything, but you know coming in that there's going to be a certain amount of missions. And after the mission, you optionally can report your outcome back, and that outcome back will impact future missions. It's like actual war, except fun.
And so it'd sort of be like a mixture of the individual narrative of like, this particular thing happened, so that has this outcome on your table, but also big impacts where, everyone came together and managed to blow up the shield generators. And so that, changes it for everyone. So I think it's sort of a fun idea. I think things like that have been run before, but I don't know about in BattleTech.
Exactly. And I know that Catalyst itself has done these worldwide events in which people would come in, they play this one mission, and then dependent on the outcome of these missions, a lore event would actually be rewritten and changed that goes into the books. But that, I think, is the closest thing that has been done in this regard. And that is literally a lore impact. Whereas we want to build a campaign in a way just like if someone was GMing for you dedicated, they would change and modify things. And there's going to be a different level of depth with this concept. So let's break down the high-level framework that we have in mind right now. So, most simple thing. Number one, Every month, a scenario is released to the community, and this scenario includes multiple unique mission briefings that align to specific branches that you and your individual lance are on. So as you play the game and as you succeed or fail in missions or certain outcomes happen, you'll move to different branches. And the next mission that you play will be branch specific. And so on your table, you'll know, okay, I won this mission, so that means I am now on branch A. And when you look at the mission briefing pack, you'll be like, okay, we're doing branch A. And the mission briefing itself, one thing we really want to commit to is an actual audio recorded mission briefing with like sound effects and stuff like that. So something literally that we'll provide to you that at the beginning of your game, you can be like, play. And all of a sudden it's your con or it's your, mercenary commander telling you, this is the brief, this is the stakes, this is what's happening, to get you into that groove.
Blasted over the loudspeaker in your local game store.
Dude, people will think you're so cool. So, your game table will play an individual lance. We're brainstorming. It's composed of between 2 to 6 units, depending on how many players at your table. So essentially, everyone has 1 unit or so. And this lance is going to individually evolve across the length of 11 scenarios. We're going to commit to 11 scenarios to tell this story. And as we mentioned, the outcome of the scenarios will impact not only the composition of your individual lance, but also your future path.
Is 11 a lot? 11 seems like a lot.
Considering how long our role-playing campaigns last, Michael, 11 is a drop in the bucket.
The right people to ask.
Yeah, 11 is a drop in the bucket. We're like, years. How long did our Star Wars Force and Destiny campaign last? How many years?
Oh, I don't even know.
It must have gone
it
5
all blurs
years
together after a while.
5 years, like playing at least monthly. Like it just kept on. Oh man, what a beautiful adventure. Anyhow.
We'll say 11, but listeners, if you have any feedback, any ideas, is 11 too many? Is 11 not enough? Are you only committed if this is like a full grueling, like 4-year-long war? Let us know what you think. How long do your campaigns usually run?
These 11 scenarios, we're thinking of launching this, if people have interest, in January next year. It's how we'll start out our new season of BungleTech. And every episode that we release will include the new scenario and all that information. It'll just be part of the whole shabam, shebang, shazoom, shazap, boom, pow. I don't know. The whole glorious explosive package.
Nathan's tripping on cold medication right now.
And yes, so 1 a month over that period. But obviously, maybe that story tells something and maybe the people really love this. We do that year. And then people are like, holy Toledo, we want more. We want to continue the story and et cetera, et cetera. We can always build on it. But we wanted to 100% commit to something that we thought was manageable. And planning this for 11 as a start, I think is a manageable little arc that we can build.
For some definition of manageable. I worry a little bit, but I'm willing to commit.
And here's how we're going to make it manageable, people. So the scenario that we release is going to be conceptually the same. So for example, maybe scenario 3 is a salvage recovery mission. And so that salvage recovery mission will be universal across all the different branches. But dependent on what path you are and dependent on your own lance's individual performance, the states and the stakes will be different. So think of it like this. You have just chased pirates back to their home base, okay? In your previous mission, you successfully routed the pirates very, very well. You achieved all these outcomes. Now you're chasing them to their base, and now they're going to try to remove their hardware before you can destroy it. How about in the previous mission, if you didn't successfully chase the pirates away, now you're the one in your base trying to salvage stuff as the pirates are trying to attack it. So essentially, this is a very simplistic high-level view or high-level description showcasing how will have the same mission mode, but the states and stakes will change dramatically. And depending on the overall state of the community's path performance, it will impact the states and stakes of other paths. For example, like Michael said earlier, everyone, 80% of players recorded that they destroyed the generator in mission 1. Okay, that generator was destroyed. Well, it turns out that the pirate base doesn't have any power anymore. Or it turns out that your base only is on backup power. Little things and little outcomes are going to impact how the overall experience plays out on the table. And when we release a scenario, we'll also release a form that will be very simple. Like it'll be like a Google form or something like that, where you can just log in and max 3 minutes be like, okay, destroyed the lance, did this, certain key things that you might not even think are important that we just want to track to give us little narrative beats that we can pull on in the future. For example, did the VIP extract? Yes. Did the VIP extract without receiving any damage? Like what percentage? Et cetera, et cetera. We can start playing on this stuff and making the overall campaign more unique based on the entire community's experience contributing to it. Next point.
Transitioning.
The campaign will begin and end narratively with various narrative touch points throughout, okay? So it's not just going to be a mission briefing with no narrative backing. No, we'll create some good old-fashioned narrative backing so you will know where you are in the universe, what you're doing, why you're there. And the start will, be the same for everybody, obviously. And the narrative end will once again tie in everything that's happened, or attempt to tie in everything that's happened from
every single thing. Every detail will be relevant.
Every left arm armor pip destroyed will be calculated. Yeah.
So you will have to, as part of the after action report, submit a complete video of your entire session so that we can, go through and analyze.
Yeah, we want
Albert. I can't believe you left your friend out to hang like that. You're getting court-martialed.
We got to have random questions like, during this game, how many rule mistakes did you realize you were making? And then we can have okay, 50% of people realize they made a rule mistake. Okay, in this mission, all of a sudden, the Op 4 Lance is allowed to break 3 rules in their favor or something like that. just have weird outcomes like that. Don't make rule mistakes, everybody.
Elevated bungle levels. We're detecting high levels of bungling in this planet.
And what I want to do too in this form, I thought would be really cool, is if people end up in the form, we give people the opportunity to highlight moments of glory, or moments of, glory, however you define it, can be embarrassing, whatever. And then literally
embarrassing glory.
Embarrassing. That's my type of glory. When I was on Big Red's stream the other day, he asked me what's this epic moment? And I'm like, I tend to only really remember my failed moments. And so then I started explaining all my bungles. I know I have tons of epic moments, but to me, those just they're washed away straight away by the bungling moments. Yeah. So I would also love if people are, really engaged with this and they're submitting stuff this happened in this game. We can literally include stuff like that in narrative touch points throughout the campaign. Like when Sergeant Corporal and this Lance did this, boom, 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 almost add it to the mission briefings to put it as part of the lore in the universe, I think will be really, really cool.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
So narratively enshrined, we do all this, we set this all up, and we're going to collaborate with some people on the back end. For example, I really want to collaborate with Denham Hardman from the Mech Bay podcast. We've already discussed it. He's a very seasoned GM, he runs games like this all the time, not in this sort of global nature, but he's always running campaign days. And I think he thought this would be a cool little value add. And I really value his insight. Dante, if you remember, he's a previous guest. He's a very experienced GM, did some really cool stuff in his Wolverine Shattered Sphere source book. Very experienced GM. Michael's obviously a very experienced GM. He's GM'd a gazillion things. A lot of respect for him. And I have dabbled with GMing as well, right? So we have 4 GMs that can come together to make this amazing creation. And I'm sure I'll source more. Like maybe if we get the interest, I'm going to reach out to other podcasts. I'm like, hey, you know what? How about you create the exact scenario for this mission? And then obviously I'll give them framework and stuff like that and help them work through it. But like we can get like guest scenarios and stuff like that, build it out. I don't know. So many cool opportunities for collaboration. Collaboration is so cool. Collaboration is so cool.
It's all about the community. Community building.
That's what the community tells us. We're just smoking our own reefer.
Yeah, why is the community always talking about how great the community is?
Screw you, community. I'm going to cut you down at the knees. Okay, so we do this, but then you play with the mech and rule base you want. Encapsulating the scenario we have created. You know what? Like, when we're talking to Randall, when we're talking to everybody, everyone plays BattleTech different. We're not going to say use advanced rules like we play. We're not going to say do this, do that. You come to the table with your own rules because, frankly, it doesn't matter. It's your game. All we care about is what happens in your game. You play it how you want. You bring the mech designs you want. We're not going to limit you. We'll give some recommendations and stuff like that. But you essentially are playing how you want to in the scenario we've created. And all you really manage is the tracking of your individual lance and pilots in between sessions and the outcomes of what you've done, which would result in the path you're on, because those things are going to influence little elements. For example, we might say, scenario 1, you lost a pilot in the battle, a pilot died. In scenario 2, we'll have something like a note, like, did a pilot die in this battle? Okay, yes. You replace this pilot with a gunnery skill of like 1 higher and piloting skill of 1 lower. So we'll have little elements that get thrown in there that make, as individual things happen in your lance, things sort of branch out and your lance starts feeling more and more individualized throughout the length of the campaign. Even though the scenarios at a core, the same concept, the stakes in your lance composition, all the stuff that's happened will make every play experience unique.
All right, I got a couple questions. How do you envision this being balanced? We say, you bring your own mech, bring your own lance, play how you want. How are we gonna balance it for when you bring your assault lance of like 3 generals and a fire starter, and the next table over brings their Steiner Scout lance? How do we manage that?
I don't want to reinvent the wheel with this. We're going to use concepts that are found in, like campaign operations, the chaos campaign stuff. We're going to leverage all this stuff. The new Mercenary box set has all these different mission briefings and ways to create contracts and stuff like that. They aren't necessarily applicable to this vision, but we're going to pull as much as we can and use the rule base, like assume that the rule base being used are the standard rule base or whatever rules you want to use, unless you want a house rule. But the easiest way is we can balance things via BV. So we'll say, okay, when you start your game, we recommend you putting a BV value of this for your lance. And then op4s will be built out of opposing BV values. So we'll just use the BV system. It's straightforward. There's now some for battlefield support points and stuff like that. They've rejigged the entire system. So we can start incorporating that in a very sneaky and fun way. I know they rebalanced everything in the Mercenary box set. So I think it's 30 points BV for 1 battlefield support point. Don't quote me on that. Might be 20, might be 40, might be 5,000. I don't know. It's named.
We don't know the rules.
We don't know the rules, but we will use it. And yeah, no, I think that's really it. Like, so let's say we say, okay, your starting lance has to be limited to 4,000 BV per mech. Do what you want to do. Or we recommend this range. We say, okay, depending on how you want to play the game, how powerful you want to be, okay, start between 2,000 to 4,000. Okay, then you have the BV value of your lance. It's that static number. And then the op4, we say, your op4 is the BV built out of the BV value of your lance times by 0.8. Let's say you're on a track, you've been having really a rough run, you're on a lower track, you've been losing. So now your opponents are sending sort of the lower end mercenaries against you. So yeah, it's a little bit easier. Or maybe you're the aces, you've been crushing, you're on a sort of a top tier sort of pathway. Not that the tiers aren't, the pathways aren't going to be good and bad. It's going to be ranges of bad overall because that's what war is. But then they send, their ace pilots against you. So you're fighting against a lance that is now composed out of 1.2 your BV value. And we can throw some mechs in there to suggest, like, these would be great mechs to throw in regardless. And, like, of options for the timeline. And so it's there for you to build out.
Yeah. And that's sort of like one of the BattleTech flexibility things. And the idea behind this, it's not exactly like canned missions, but it's also not, completely rails off. Like some GM has to figure everything out. It's somewhere in between where, there'll probably be like a set list of recommended opposing forces, assuming you used our recommendations for building your lance in the first place. But if you decide that you wanted to, slam through it with 4 assaults the whole way through, that's when you should be looking at BV times 1.2, and your GM can sort of tailor that to your particular group, or just use what's on the the recommendation if you're looking for something easier, because different groups are different. Different people want to put in different levels of effort. We want to support everyone, every single person, every possible play style, all of them.
Even other games. We want people to be able to use this system when playing Monopoly or Settlers of Catan. Once again, Settlers of Catan, I return to you. I will steal all your players. I hate you. I hate you, Settlers of Catan.
Okay, well, thinking about GMs, this is basically going to need a GM, right? You're going to need someone who's willing to run the opposing lance and at least like show up and play the audio file for you. There maybe you don't need to do a lot more than that. We want to make this as easy as possible, but you need someone to play I don't know if they're going to be the bad guys, the other team.
We'll make them the good guys.
Maybe the good guys.
Let's see. Yeah, we'll make you play as the bad guys. That's fun. Yes. So, when we're thinking about why to do this, like why this could add value, one of the big reasons was, in my opinion, is that people often want experienced GMing, but feel like it's just too much to start from scratch. It's too much to build everything out themselves. Other role-playing systems, you get those little campaign books that walk you through a full campaign. BattleTech doesn't really have an equivalent, to my knowledge. Instead, it's all that specific historical battle recreation events, more standalone stuff. And then they give you the frameworks to build it out, but there aren't these pre-made campaigns, which are more accessible to new GMs. So for one, we thought there'd be value to doing this, and because if you want GM experience, this would be a great way to do it. Essentially, we're doing like 80% of the work for you. Obviously, you're still going to have to customize some stuff and change some stuff, but we're getting 80% of the way there. And we don't want this to be something that you have an inherent dedicated GM for. You can, but this is built under the concept of rotating GMs. So basically, you have a player group of 6. During that 11 scenario period, every player takes a turn, like they alternate. Now I'm the GM, now I'm the GM, now I'm the GM. And so that way, everyone gets a chance to play. And because we've built out the 80%, the experience from the perspective of the campaign and the storytelling and the rule base and all that stuff is going to be consistent, or more consistent than if you have standard rotating GMs where everyone has a different style. Not that consistency is or inconsistency is bad, but sometimes it can be a little bit jarring in a narrative perspective.
Yeah. You don't have to let your whole table doesn't need to know the secrets, because none of you know the secrets yet. You're all experiencing it together.
Exactly. Yeah. So I think that really, Michael, I, and the group that we are going to collaborate with are really here to do 80% of the work and to help you as a player. If you're the type of player that, man, you are sick and tired of just playing skirmishes, you want this narrative BattleTech experience you keep on hearing about, but frankly, it's too daunting to actually plan your own campaign from a time perspective, from a management perspective, all that stuff. Well, we're here for you to share the load across your player group. So everyone gets experience GMing if they want it, and it's consistent, it's easier. And like I say, we're going to really try to streamline it. So really the only things that I imagine being the work that the GM is doing at the individual game is, well, first, when you guys collectively, and this is not GM work, but you guys are going to collectively decide what your mechs are starting. And then in individual missions, there might be work in you selecting the mechs that are being fought against. Once again, we'll give suggestions and stuff like that. But if you want to branch from that, you're going to be selecting those mechs. Other than that, at the end, tracking and responding to that 2-minute survey, the group can technically do that collectively. And you collectively are managing your own record sheets as individuals and stuff like that. So I think it's really going to take like so much work off the GM's shoulder. The person who's GMing the game is going to become more of a facilitator. Let's say an FM, a facilitator master, rather than a game master.
I mean, they'll still be doing the game. Like when you say 80% of the work, it's like 80% of the prep work. We're not going to show up and GM your game. That's still, you still got to move the pieces around.
Michael, we are going to show up and run their game. What the heck?
Every
We're flying.
person. That's the point of the global event.
Yes. And that's one thing I hadn't mentioned yet. If you want to participate, you have to pay $5,000 a month to fly me and Michael out to your table to GM. It's a great deal. We're going to make it happen. Exactly. So it's the prep work. But I think the prep work is the most daunting thing. That's what I feel. That's the impression I get from most GMs when they're starting, is that the prep work is what's the most scary. Obviously, managing a game is not necessarily easy, but at least with the prep work out of the way, you can get some GM experience under your brow. What's an expression? Under the hood?
Belt.
Under your belt. There you go. I like under the brow better. Under your toupee. Under your... Yeah. It's under, you just put it underwear somewhere. Yeah, under your underwear. I don't know. But yeah, no, but and obviously experienced GMs, like, this is just a boon to you too, because you still have your freedom to do whatever you want. As an experienced GM, used a pre-built campaign, you realize you take here and there these little things, these little elements, but you add your own twist into it. And so our framework will be high level enough for you to really, play.
So talk a little bit about why. Why did you have this wonderful, terrible dream, Nathan?
I like to create work for the BungleTech podcast.
Right on the heels of our giant bungle test. Speaking of which, if you haven't submitted your bungle test yet, go get it in there. You got like 2 weeks or something.
Yeah, November 10th. You still have, by the time this is launched, pretty much 2 weeks.
2 weeks.
Yeah.
So right on the heels of the bungle test, Nathan's got this idea for a crazy long-running, 11 scenarios is a lot. Like this is we're talking a big old adventure pack. So why do you think we don't have enough free time, Nathan?
Listen, man, I am way too busy for this. I don't know why I proposed it, but it's because, there's a few things. Okay. I'm going to tell you why, people. It's because as a BattleTech podcast, we are in a unique place in the community where we can actually facilitate something like this. We actually have a big enough community where this is something we can actually all do together. And I think it's a unique value add that we haven't seen anywhere in the BattleTech community. We just haven't had it. We're podcasts that, you as our listener are part of our community. And I don't know, what a great value add. It just seems like a no-brainer that we could collaborate and give this to the community. And the reason I have faith in this process is because, talking to Randall and talking to other players, we've talked about how classic BattleTech tells a story in its gameplay. And the same scenario played by different players will have a different narrative weight based on those outcomes that happen in that battle. And to me, that is what makes this interesting, because even though the mission briefing scenario, like the attack, defend, or whatever, that concept will be the same, with the differentiation of states and stakes based on your previous performance in your path and previous outlier outcomes, like things like your pilot died, your pilot headshot someone, your pilot specialized in this ability, your pilot got headshot. Bum. these different things will build out uniqueness in your experience. And then on top of that, the narrative stories that you tell on the table, I kicked someone's head off. I fell and I couldn't get up, like blah, 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 blah. I was swarmed and then I activated my self-destruct sequence and I punched out and I nuked everybody. All those individual things that you end up doing at the table that tells that narrative story is just going to make it feel holistically like a very good, narratively driven story campaign. So I think that there are some game systems where I think this model wouldn't work because I think that the gameplay is not inherently narrative. And I would say, okay, this is going to come out a little bit flat and it's going to feel same across the different scenarios. I completely feel that this will not feel same at all across the different scenarios because people are going to be telling their own stories. We're going to have the different states and stakes. And on top of that, the different outcomes based on their own individual lances. And then the community outcomes of people giving feedback that are going to change overall scope and things that are happening in the mission. To me, it's like, holy Toledo. It's such a cool idea. It's a cool idea. I don't have time. You don't have time. Let's make the time, baby. Let's do it. It's just such a cool idea. And it hasn't been done, to my knowledge, in the BattleTech community. People have ran GM campaigns, obviously, but never something like this that impacts this sort of scope that's going to have these individual, once again, narrative briefings that you can play at the table. Little things like that are just going to make it feel juicier, man. It's going to be so juicy.
Mm-hmm. And at the end, it will just be a hopefully pretty cool pack of missions.
Yeah.
If you're listening to this in 2027, going back through the BungleTech back catalog, and you're like, oh man, I wonder what happened to that. Probably there will be a bundle of missions somewhere, I assume.
Yeah. And that's something we were talking about before the session. Like you asked the question, Michael, you're like, well, what happens if people miss a mission? And are people going to get left behind and stuff like that? And it's like, no, you can skip a mission if you want to contribute to the narrative elements of next mission. You're going to play it how you want. We'll make it really accessible. And let's say you miss the entire year period, you find BungleTech in, what would it be, 2026. The campaign's done. We're talking about how cool it is and you're so jealous, man. Well, all the missions are still going to be there. You can go and play it out like a scenario packet if you want to. Of course, we can't travel back in time and change the experiences. But if you invent a time machine, I will consider traveling back in time, risking the space-time continuum just so I can influence the campaign arc. Yeah, I would do it.
And
man.
I mean, what the heck, 2026 player, send us your after-action reports anyways. We maybe can't affect the war, but we still want to hear about it. Tell us about your cool game.
Exactly. Yeah, no, anyhow. I think I'm enthralled by the concept. I think it'll work because of the system. I think it will, because of the platform and the community we have, that we can actually do something of this scope. And we just got to make sure we have enough time. But that's why we commit to the 11. We'll plan this in a way that is very... we'll pre-plan. There's going to be a lot of pre-planning work, and then the states and the stakes will be built out. But we'll build the campaign, and if people want this, we can build the entire campaign in December. It's just then the individual states and stakes, the stuff that gets work each month, that's going to change and be modified as we go. So yeah, Michael, tell me, what do you think about it?
Yeah, so I mean, Nathan brings a lot of ideas. Nathan will just randomly on any day of the week just send me the latest and greatest idea for, I don't know, what the podcast should do, a new game mode, more party game modes. I get a constant stream of Nathan ideas, and most of them are, Nathan ideas. But
what does that mean?
This one...
What does that mean?
But some of them, this one I heard, and I'm like, oh man, that sounds like so much work, but I guess it could be neat. And then Nathan and I were talking about it, and you sold me on it. I think it sounds super cool. I think it'll be fun to write. I think it'll be fun to play. I think it'll be fun to participate in, and just have a bunch of people playing. I don't know exactly how many people would play, but as long as we get a few after action reports every time, I think that's rad. So I think it's a cool idea. Like you were saying about, taking the 80% of the prep work out of there. It is like coming up with all the stuff is hard, and sort of, a lot of the time you just want to like play with your friends or whatever, but you don't want to have to do homework beforehand. And so campaigns like this are a great way to do that, and then tie it into like the overall impact and like being a part of something. I think it's a really cool idea. I think it sounds awesome, and I hope that other people think it sounds awesome too, so that we can do this.
Heck yeah.
You gotta write in. Come tell us on whatever channel you want, if this seems like something that you'd participate in, because we gotta make the call in the next couple of months if we're gonna start writing it for 2025.
I finally got a good idea. I finally got an idea that isn't a Nathan
You
idea.
have lots of good ideas, Nathan. It's sort of a numbers game, Bungle test, that ended up being a great idea.
Yes.
BungleTech campaign, probably also a great idea. I think it sounds like a great idea. I hope the community agrees.
Yes. And so let me just say one thing. I'm just going to recap. I'm going to recap what this is exactly, okay? This is like the elevator
just in case
pitch.
You lost the plot somewhere. We're normally really clear and concise and direct in our explanations of things. So, if you sort of lost the plot, that sounds like a you problem, but Nathan's here to help you just in case. Give us the big summary, Nathan.
So this is the elevator pitch to you. It's a long elevator ride, for the record.
Why didn't we start with the elevator pitch?
Well, yeah, we sort of did, but we sort of danced around it. So I'm going to give it to you. And then remember, we're asking your feedback. So there's two ways. There's two ways to let us know if this is interesting to you. One, you can come onto our Patreon and respond to a poll there. And this poll will be publicly accessible, so anyone can go in there and vote in it. You don't need a paid account or anything like that. Or you can send us an email. Those are the two ways that you can let us know if you are interested in this concept. Patreon, new, modern, fancy-dancy, cool technology way to let us know. Email, old school. We don't have a fax option because I don't have a fax machine, which would be even more old school. But those are the two ways, okay? But we want to know, because basically, I'm going to say that we're going to give you till November 27th to give us feedback. So that's a full month from the release of this episode. And based on that, we're going to decide if we're going to go forward with this or not. If we get enough interest from the community, we are going to say, heck yeah, we are going to do this. And we are going to aim to start it in January. So then we'll have to do some planning work and all that stuff. So November 27th is going to be that deadline. So here's the elevator pitch. Every month, a scenario is released to the community. Each individual lance evolves across the length of 11 scenarios, with the outcome of scenarios impacting the composition of the lance and their future. The scenario conceptually is the same, but the narrative and tangible states and stakes are different dependent on the path of that lance. The overall state of the community's path performance impacts the state and stakes of other paths. And the campaign begins and ends narratively with various narrative touchpoints throughout. Players can use the era and rule base they want, encapsulated in the scenario we've created that is built with standard BattleTech rules. We manage the scenario and outcome design. Players manage the tracking of their individual lance accomplishments. Get out of the elevator! Elevator pitch over! The building's on fire! Why are we in the elevator? We're supposed to use the stairs! I'm burning! Help, Michael, help!
I can't help you, Nathan. I'm sorry. Nothing can help you.
Sweet. So that's it.
That was a sweet elevator pitch. That was so slick.
Dude.
Thanks for giving us that, Nathan.
I was shaking your hand the entire time. I don't know if you could feel that, like aggressively shaking your hand, just holding it, locking eyes.
I was trying.
Give me your business. Give me your business. Give me your business. It was a sweaty handshake too. Did you feel like the moistness? Yeah.
Buy my campaign. Buy my campaign.
This will change my life. This will make everything better. Finally, everything will be better. Sweet, guys. Okay, so that's it. We've chatted about it. Think about it. Or if you don't need to think about it because you're already like, heck yeah, I want to do this, talk to your player groups about it, socialize the concept, and answer our poll by November 27th. Because once again, we're going to do it. I think it's a super cool idea, and I think it could be like a very unique experience for everyone. And just remember, if you miss a mission, you can do missions even technically. Like, you don't need to necessarily submit the form if you don't want to. You can do it later. You can do it earlier. You're going to be able to play it your way. But what we're really looking for is to understand if there is interest in this type of scenario pack and participating in it. That's simple.
What do you think?
What do you think?
We're staring directly at you, listener, right now.
You. Don't look away from me. Look in my... Hey, you. What do you think?
We need your answer.
Is that too aggressive? Here, I did the aggressive one. You be more kind.
Okay, we're doing a good podcaster, bad podcaster.
Sure.
Please, we need you to. We just want your feedback. Listen, if you don't want to see what he's like, if he doesn't get your feedback, so trust me, it's just going to be better for everyone if you just come to the Patreon or send us an email. Just drop us a quick line. Let us know if you think it's a good or bad idea. If you think it's a bad idea, that's okay. It's okay. Don't worry about it. Just tell us. Just be honest and open with us. But yeah, if you don't come and let us know soon, you don't want to see what Nathan gets like.
Okay, so mine was sort of a little bit aggressive, but yours sort of felt like you were a victim of abuse. So it was like abused podcaster and a slightly aggressive podcaster, but that's close enough. Okay, that is the end of this segment. On to the next one.
This is Professor Michael presenting The Sphere We Live In. The Direct Reciprocal Unmanned Message Network, commonly known by crew as the Drum Network, or simply the Grapevine, was essential to explore core operations. Unlike the large, staffed hyperpulse generator stations which formed the backbone of most communications in the sphere, the drum architecture relied on a large number of fully automated and self-sufficient HPG relay caches. These caches formed a network with at least 2 neighbors within their 50 light-year range, and were configured to transmit messages to peer nodes on a regular schedule, usually once per solar day. Messages were coded with a sequence of destinations so that they could be autonomously routed to a desired location within the overall range of the drum network. While this design proved reliable and resilient in the deep periphery, concerns about security, long transmission delays, and challenges in delivering messages accurately to incommunicado ships ensured the network saw little use beyond the Corps' mission. Now you know about the sphere we live in.
Secondary objective, rule check discovery segment. Initiating.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to our Rule Check Discovery segment. Today, another embarrassing rule mistake to share. A rule mistake that probably caused so much pain and confusion in our games. This is like one of those moments that once you found out the real rule, it was almost like this moment of like, oh my God, that is so much worse. What are we talking about, Michael?
We are talking about pilot skill rolls stacking. And I think this is such a common one that it's actually in the Battle Mech manual as a common misconception. At least some of it is.
That makes sense. And basically what this is let's say that in a weapon attack phase, someone shoots you with lasers and they hit your feet. They're aiming for your feet and they hit your left leg and your right leg. And both of your foot actuators get hit. Okay? So when your foot actuator gets destroyed, if I recall correctly, you have to do piloting skill roll +1. So previously how we used to do this is we would do the piloting skill roll for one of them and then the other one after. So if it would be +1, my piloting skill's 4, I'm going to roll a 5 once and then I'm going to roll 5 again. Or sometimes, sorry. Sometimes we do it that way. Other times we do it where we'd roll the 5 for the first one, and then for the second one, now we'd roll 6. Because we're like, well, now there's already a damaged foot actuator, and that foot actuator gives a +1 on PSRs, so that means it has to be 6. But what you're actually supposed to do is if you've had all your actuators destroyed, you add them all up into a single target number. So technically, because they're each +1/+1, for both of those rolls, we should be rolling a 6 and a 6. Once again, assuming our piloting skill is 4.
Yeah, so I think that I think the way we were playing it sort of makes sense if you view it as like it's like a save from Dungeons and Dragons where some trigger happens and then you have to make a save at that time, and then something else happens, you get hit by another attack, it causes more damage, you make another save, but now it's harder because you have stacking damage, and then oh, now I took 20 points of damage, I have to make another save. Oh, I took another 20 points of damage, I have to make another save. So that's sort of how I think we played it, basically, is like when a trigger for a pilot skill roll happens, you make a pilot skill roll. But it's more like they accumulate and stack at the end of that phase. So you take all of the sources of pilot skill rolls in that phase, all of the stacking, accumulating penalties for them, add them all together, and you do that many rolls at that high of a modifier, which can be really brutal sometimes.
It can be horrible how it stacks, but it also makes it so much easier than having to remember all these different target numbers. It actually makes it more difficult, but simplifies the rolls you need to do, at least the knowledge of the rolls. And I remember we used to as well not resolve criticals straight away. So what we do, and this is very common, where people will play and they'll resolve all their damage and there's criticals that go in. There's nothing explosive, so they decide, okay, you know what? We'll just do all the damage first, then we'll get the criticals out of the way.
Mm-hmm.
So I think this is a very common way to play the game. And, I understand why people do it. And so when we were doing that, because we were also doing the stacking rule wrong, then we get to the end of the phase and we're like, okay, so now I had these 4 actuators hit, and I need to determine my 4 PSR rolls. Okay, so this one's 5 because the foot actuator was hit. This is the first one. But now my other foot actuator was hit, or was my hip hit first, or was my other thing hit first? Like what happened? So remembering the order of resolution, because we separated, it made it more confusing. And then sometimes we would choose just subjectively, okay, what is like the best way to do this?
Mm-hmm.
So it makes the most sense, or it's the easiest, the highest likelihood to succeed. We would just sort of make calls like that.
Yeah. So then there's a little bit of like min-maxing in there. I feel like you had in mind, like you thought there was an actual like flow chart for an order you were supposed to resolve different sources of PSRs.
Yeah, like the damage, like one from damage. Like I always thought the one from damage would be last.
Because that one sort of makes sense. That one goes at the end of the phase. But, when you take a crit, then that's happening right away.
Simultaneous damage resolution. So it doesn't even make sense when you look at holistically how BattleTech works that these would be not stacking. Because they're not happening separately. They're not happening one after another. They're happening at the same time. You're just resolving them one after another.
I remember those first few times playing BattleTech with you, and that was some messy BattleTech. And this is the sort of thing that, I think a lot of sort of how I view BattleTech still comes from those early, very confusing days. And things
The
like
dark days.
stacking pilot skill roll, and then we weren't consistent about making our seatbelt checks. And like, well, what penalties do you apply when you're making a pilot check to not get hurt from a fall, and like all sorts of things. It got very confusing. The rule is very straightforward, extremely brutal, but it's nice that you basically just need to keep tally of how many PSRs do you need to make. And then at the end of the phase, you can go through and like figure out what all the modifiers are from the different sources. Very brutal. Does make some very cool, like, I don't know, I say cool, some hilarious moments when a mech just gets absolutely slammed, and you have 3 different leg actuators blow up in the same phase that you took 40 points of damage, and you're like, all right, well, I gotta make 4 rolls at +6. Never gonna make that.
Exactly, yeah. I like it's totally the case. Like our way of playing it changed the game by increasing our survivability. by just making it so much slower and more challenging to manage. Like it's a pretty big rule mistake because like we'd get away with things we normally wouldn't get away with. Increase the survivability of the mech. And anytime I think in BattleTech, when you minimize the impact of PSRs, you really are messing with the core system because PSRs are so fundamentally important and such an important equalizer in the system.
Nathan's just looking for a justification for why going in with a gunnery of 4 and a pilot skill of 1 is actually optimal gameplay.
Just another reason. I'm glad you picked that up. I didn't even need you just saw the logical conclusion. I didn't even get there yet, Michael. It's so clear that this is the right way.
Nathan's been trying to sell dumping all your points into piloting for as long as we've been playing.
That's right. Piloting is more important than gunnery. There you go. I said it, everybody. I said it. Fight me. Don't actually fight me. But if you have a different opinion, well, I've already heard it probably, but feel free to share it anyhow.
Tell Nathan why he's wrong, or he's right. Tell me I'm wrong. Tell me math is incorrect.
Actually, let's do that. Don't tell me if I'm wrong, but if Michael's wrong, please send us a message because that guy, ever since he got the title of being the only one on the podcast allowed to be associated with a sensual sounding voice, he's just been so damn full of himself. I tell you, we rolled on it, man. We rolled on it. That could have been me. Other than the mess, is there anything else that this rule mistake, how else did it change the game? Other than making things easier, other than making things less manageable, is there any other thing that we think happened?
Honestly, this one doesn't seem like too distorting to me. Like, yeah, it makes you less likely to fall on your butt. It makes the bookkeeping easier. So it makes the bookkeeping easier if you do the rule correctly. It makes the bookkeeping very weird and confusing if you don't use the rule. But in terms of how the game is played, I feel like it just gave us a worse experience.
People, don't do this. Do it the right way. It may seem more vicious, but it'll just make life so much more easier.
So much more easier.
Simultaneous damage resolution, man. Everything's happening at the same time. We just gotta get that in our head. Everything happens at the same time in different phases. Everything happens at the same time. Movement happens at the same time. Sort of.
Kind of.
Movement happens at the same-ish time. It's like it all happens in like a 5-second period.
But the weapons can land one after the other. Sometimes you got to optimize, the sequence of your large laser needs to land before your cluster LBX.
We got to get into that conversation we had when I was saying that advanced criticals makes that no longer the case.
Oh yeah, you're right.
We got to get into that sometime. Advanced criticals changes that dynamic. Yeah, argue. well, let's take it off air. Bonus content. Michael and me yelling at each other.
Yeah, meet me out back. 10 minutes.
Listen, I haven't run the math, but instinctually it feels that way. Instinctually, and my instincts are really accurate, Michael.
Extremely
Come on, trust me on
accurate
this.
instincts.
All right, everybody. That's the mistake. Don't make it.
Or do make it.
And if you did make it, it's okay. Bungle away, but come to the right way with us. The documented rule way is so much better, so much easier. Fall and embrace the fall.
This is Professor Michael presenting The Sphere We Live In. Columbus Station was the Explorer Corps' largest facility in the 31st century, and also one of its most isolated. The unique demands of operating a full aerospace field and dropship dry dock more than 750 light-years from Terra, camouflaged among the dense scrub woods, led to a variety of unorthodox tools and processes. For example, a lance of fire tender mechs was maintained, battle mech variants with their weapons removed and replaced with modified flamers using tanks of fire-retardant foam. The enhanced maneuverability and versatility over conventional firefighting vehicles proved extremely effective, and the variant saw limited use at other Comstar facilities, eventually prompting the development of commercial firefighting cargo mechs. Now you know about the sphere we live in.
Tertiary objective. Stories of the Inner Sphere segment. Initiating.
Zeke! Zeke! Bring the camera! Michelle Baldwin shouted at her cameraman, but not too loud lest she spook crowd members who understood they were about to be filmed. The duel's starting. Although technically illegal under the laws of Ashio 3, the underground mech dueling ring nonetheless drew a crowd, and with it, commerce. Normally the betting would give roughly equal odds to two former DCMS MechWarriors, but today's battle was something special. Here it comes. Michelle pointed up at the enormous doors leading into the warehouse. As they creaked open, she could spot the olive drab hull of a champion as it rumbled through to stand in the middle of the building. Her source had been right. The SLDF were dueling Ronin. This would be the story of a lifetime. For a moment, Michelle forgot to badger her cameraman to ensure that he was discreetly capturing the moment the SLDF deigned to fight a masterless Curitan mech warrior. The sleek curves of the champion were so much more aerodynamic than the squat and brutal hunchback that was to be its opponent. But then, she remembered she was here for a story, not a bootleg mech gladiator video. Keep rolling. She pointed to the crowd. I'm going to see if I can get some interview audio. The crowds were already starting to shout and throw betting slips at the ferroglass that was all that stood between them and high explosive death. Most understood that a direct hit would vaporize the bleachers, but the crowd was so confident in the abilities of the pilots who fought that they still came to watch the show. So far, no mass casualty events had been reported. Then again, there wasn't a lot of reporting going on at these events. That's why Michelle was there, after all. She sat down beside a man wearing a corporal stripes on a jumpsuit with an SLDF patch on the shoulder. Excuse me, sir, could I talk to you about today's match? The man turned, a grizzled face, took one look at the microphone, and then waved dismissively. Fine, but no names. Thank you, sir. Michelle nodded, aware that the SLDF had forbidden participating in these honor duels. Whoever he was, he'd be court-martialed for just being inside the warehouse. What can you tell me about the match? The corporal shrugged. Our guy has the advantage of speed, but I don't know if that's gonna matter much in this warehouse. The Ronin, he's got a big cannon and more armor. This surprised Michelle. It sounds like the SLDF mech warrior is outmatched. Yeah, well, the SLDF doesn't exactly like to advertise when they put their money on the wrong horse. Oh, the champion ain't bad for some armored recon or tactical maneuvers, but a one-on-one slugfest like this? The corporal spat. Then why did the SLDF pilot agree to the duel? The corporal shrugged again. Pride, I guess. We're supposed to be the best. A klaxon sounded and the match started. There were several stacks of boxes that gave the mechs some semblance of cover, but as the corporal predicted, the confined space rendered the champion's speed advantage useless. Several deafening booms from the hunchback's autocannon later, and the fight was over. The champion lay on its side, several smoking holes leaking fluid onto the ferrocrete foundation. That was faster than expected, the corporal remarked as he left, tossing a balled-up betting ticket to the floor. Michelle quickly clambered down the bleachers back to where Zeke had set up his hidden camera. Did you get it? She asked excitedly. I did, but... Zeke turned to the camera to reveal several inches of shrapnel sticking out the side. Thing saved my life. Fuck! Michelle's scream was cut off by a secondary detonation in the dead champion, hastening the retreat of every bystander still in the building. After over a century of resting on the laurels of the wildly successful Locust, Bergen Industries debuted the aspirationally named Champion in 2602. 3 times the mass of the Locust, the Champion sought to fulfill an SLDF requirement for a heavy recon and fast striker mech. The Champion's main rival for the bid, a modified version of the venerable Griffin from Earthworks Incorporated, achieved a similar performance profile, but with greater firepower and a lower price. But in the face of heavy lobbying, and perhaps more than a few bribes from Bergen executives, mere cost efficiency and superior performance meant the Griffin hardly stood a chance. Even after the SLDF agreed to an initial order of 200 CHP-1N models, League engineers noted the Champion to be underarmed and undergunned compared to similar mechs in its weight class. Despite these flaws, the Champion proved popular with SLDF MechWarriors, especially during the First Hidden War. In 2650, the Star League High Council announced an arms restriction that limited the size of each member state's military. The Draconis Combine had long had the largest standing army of any great house, which meant many former MechWarriors lost their livelihood after being discharged from the DCMS. However, as many of those same MechWarriors were of noble blood and piloted mechs owned not by the Combine, but by their own families, these Ronin were free to find work as mercenaries, personal bodyguards, and in a few cases, gladiators, issuing challenges to other MechWarriors in order to retain their fighting edge. For decades, the SLDF garrisons in the Combine stood above the constant fighting between Ronin. But in 2681, an SLDF MechWarrior fought and lost to a former member of the DCMS. This began a long series of duels, where the SLDF consistently lost, often resulting in the deaths of their pilots. Restoring the pride of the SLDF was secondary to preserving the lives of its MechWarriors, as the SLDF quietly enacted the Advanced Combat and Maneuvering Skills Project in 2682, better known as the Gunslinger Program, of which many graduated pilots sat in champions. Even after their advanced training program, these champion pilots failed to achieve more than an even record during the First Hidden War. It was perhaps this generally lackluster performance that eventually saw the champions sold to member states where their numbers would dwindle following the destruction of Bergen's factories on New Earth during the Ameris Civil War. Initially, the CHP-1N came armed with an advanced Artemis IV fire control system, guiding an SRM-6, and an LB-10X autocannon backed up by 2 medium and 2 small lasers. A top speed of 86.4 kilometers per hour was achieved through its aerodynamic profile and large Velar 300 engine, and 8 tons of ferrofibrous armor provided protection. However, the CHP-2N would forego the Artemis IV and LB-10X in favor of a regular SRM-6 and 10-class autocannon, as those components became lost tech during the Succession Wars. It would also lose access to ferrofibrous armor, further reducing its protection. During the height of the Star League, however, several champion refits were made available. The CHP-1N2 was a common modification that swapped the 10 single heat sinks for doubles, and the CHP-1NB, produced for the SLDF's Royal Regiments, replaced the mech's entire armament with a Gauss rifle and an ERPPC. There was even an attempt by Bergen to convert the aerodynamic champion into a land-air mech, but problems with the conversion technology kept the champion land-bound and the project was eventually scuttled. Champion numbers continued to dwindle until the clan invasion, when Comstar revealed the CHP-3N on Tukayid. This variant replaced the original with an extra light version that allowed the CHP-1N to mount 2 additional large lasers, while upgrading to double-strength heat sinks. Following Comstar's victory, Bergen Industries restored its New Earth factory and produced the CHP-3P in 3061. This version of the Champion mounted 4 ER medium lasers, 2 in each arm, an Ultra Autocannon 10, and an improved NARC missile beacon. An improved C3 computer also allowed the CHP-3P to serve as the nexus of a C3 network, making it an ideal leader for Word of Blake fast response level 2s. Even the early clans had a variant of the Champion prior to the introduction of the OmniMech. The Champion C, first built in 2867, upgraded the CHP-1N to ClanTech standards, replaced the engine with an extra light version, and added 5 jump jets for added mobility. The medium lasers were replaced by medium pulse lasers, and 2 ER medium lasers and the small lasers were upgraded to small pulse lasers. Additional armor made the Champion C a formidable opponent, although it was quickly overshadowed as OmniMechs proliferated in the late 2800s. Today, the Champion is a footnote of history. The New Earth factory was once again destroyed during the Jihad, and no new champions have been produced since 3078. Any champions seen in the Ill Clan era are either walking museum pieces or trophies taken from former Word of Blake zealots, although perhaps even a few true believers survive alongside their 60-ton machines. This has been a reading of Bad Mechs Champion, written by the syrupy Sean at SARNA. This is a fun and playful article series focused on a variety of different mechs. You can check the full expansive library of the articles, linked in our show description. And that brings us to an end of another deployment of BungleTech MechWarriors. Remember to respond to our poll regarding if you're interested in the worldwide campaign concept we were discussing today. The interest and feedback we get from you and the rest of the community will be our chief determining factor if we are going forward with the endeavor or not. You can let us know in 2 ways. 1, respond to our Patreon poll, or 2, send us an email at bungletech@outlook.com. And remember, you only have until November 27th to let us know if you are interested. As always, you can find us via Discord, email, Twitter, and Patreon, all linked in the description. And to all our current patrons, thank you again for your continued support.
And of course, as always, a quick special thank you to our deliciously blood-filled patron Loremasters, MagnumDanger and Retro Laser. Thank you for your continued delicious blood-filled support.
Michael made me do that voice, I swear. I swear it was his idea, guys. He actually suggested that. Anywho, before we wrap up, a quick word of wisdom from MechWarrior Metalhead. At a convention, we had a game where 2 players were promoted to force commanders for their side of the table, issuing orders to the players on their side. One fellow got really into it, which was great, and they were having so much fun. This may be the closest they ever get to actually playing out the fantasy of being a company commander, and they ran with it. Life's too short to be embarrassed. Live in the moment, embrace it. As in 10 years, no one is going to care if you looked ridiculous for 45 minutes while having fun at the table. Until next time, MechWarriors. Good fortunes on the battlefield. Selah.
All podcast objectives complete. Podcast shutdown sequence initiated.